All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Gabe Hakim, a co-founder and partner at Promise Venture Studio. And thank you for joining us to talk this morning at the early hour about the role of innovation in early childhood. I'll share a little bit about Promise Venture Studio and what we do to help spur innovation in the space. I will clear up one misconception up front that we often get when we say we work with early childhood entrepreneurs. People who watch Shark Tank and other shows say, oh my gosh, I can't believe they have like 3-year-olds pitching their ideas already, which is not the kind of early childhood entrepreneurs we work with, but we are on the edge of innovation, so if that's something that sounds interesting to you, we could talk about it afterward. I'm joined by my colleague and co-founder, Matt Glickman, and I'll be leading the session and he'll be helping to facilitate too. Just some expectations up front. This is a small group, so I hope we can make it as much of a discussion as possible. I would love to hear your ideas as we go. Feel free to shoot up hands along the way if you have questions you want to ask. And basically for our agenda, I'm going to spend a little bit of time getting to know each other in the room and introduce you to who Promise is. And then we'll get into the bulk of the content about why now is such a great time for innovation in early childhood, specifically to drive greater scale and impact in the field if you're interested in, as we are, issues of equity and access and outcomes. And then we have a little bit of a design session scheduled for the end where it will ideally be sort of a collective brainstorm to figure out what resonated with you and what you've heard here and where you think there might be opportunities for ongoing innovation in the field. So let's get started by introducing ourselves. Like I said, I'd like this to be a conversation, and I know you come from different parts of the Denver and broader Colorado and even national community. So we'll do a quick sort of roundabout and just have folks say your name and the organization or organizations or interests you represent. And then I was going to have something where maybe we talk to each other because I didn't know if we'd have enough time. But if you also could maybe just quickly, rather than doing that, say what you or your organization does here in Colorado. In the context of Futurebound, we're trying to build an ecosystem in Colorado of folks who work together on some of these issues. So again, just quickly your name, your organization, and maybe in like 10 to 15 words, if you can, what your organization does here in Colorado. If you don't mind, I'll have you go first.
Hi, I'm MK. Right now, I'm untethered. Currently looking for my next thing. In the past, I've worked on access and equity issues with regards to internet access, though, as it relates to K-12 schools.
Thanks, MK. Kevin, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Kevin Gilbert. I'm an engineer up in Boulder. I work in clinical, primary care screening and counseling software. I also do a side project on youth sport and development and access.
Thanks, Kevin. I think Patrick, I'm getting almost to the point where I can't read the name tags anymore, but did I get that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick.
Patrick, excuse me. Hi guys, I'm Patrick. I'm founder of Contu. We are just launching a product right here. It is a wooden box that builds minds, and early math-focused product for kids.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Don?
And I'm Don Burton, the managing partner of Learn Start, and we're a venture capital fund that invests in early childhood development startups.
Great.
Hi, I'm Vera. I'm an education specialist at London. We're currently a parent coaching app that focuses on helping parents build healthy habits for interacting with their children.
Thanks, Vera.
I'm Elaine. I'm a researcher at the Omni Institute, and we do research and evaluation in the social sector, and I focus on human development, so early childhood education, children's health services.
Great. Thank you.
My name's Afton. I'm with Nurse Family Partnership. We're a national nurse home visiting program. We work with first-time low-income mothers during pregnancy in the first 2 years of a child's life. So we operate nationally, but also throughout the state of Colorado.
Thanks, Afton.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm co-founder of Momentum Toys. We make chain reaction toys that teach kids 7 to 12 about the engineering design process.
And I'm Alana. I'm the other half of Momentous Toys.
Hi, good
good morning. My name is Matt Obashan. I'm the Director of Elementary and Early Childhood Education in Westminster Public Schools. And we work with GCI in a variety of early childhood initiatives and are stepping largely into the infant toddler space in the next 6 months. So I figured this is a good time to plug in.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Billy Powers. I am an Education Program Officer at Springpoint Partners in Philadelphia. And I'm formerly an employee of Matt's at Westminster Public Schools.
Great.
My name is Phoenix Wong, I'm the Program Director at Springpoint Partners. We invest in 0 to 5, 60 mostly innovative, progressive models of education.
My name is Alexis Dabney. I was a first through 6th grade educator for about 8 years and really became passionate about foundational years. And so I'm in a Montessori primary 3 to 6 training right now and really exploring how to get more of that in the public sector.
Lisa Woods. I'm a partner over at Osmond Foundation and the Mentologist Fund. We fund nonprofits and startups who are working on emotional resilience and mental health in early childhood phases.
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Quilliam. I'm from Roots to Wings, which is a small company that manages some traditional childcare schools, primrose schools. And we've got a few ideas of things, and are just thrilled to find somebody who's focusing on younger than K to 12.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carolyn Lyons. I'm from Boston. I've been working a lot at the national and international levels around helping businesses and foundations think about investments and innovation in early childhood.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Corey Zimmerman from the senior class. I work at the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard. I run Helping Ventures Reaching Practice Scale, and we do a lot of work with collaborative.
Great. And I saw Katie and I think Jennifer come in, give you a chance to introduce yourselves as well.
I'm Katie Richardson. I'm a pediatrician here in Colorado and spending time right now in the health technology and healthcare innovation space.
Hi everyone, Jennifer Stetter, and I'm Executive Director of Early Milestones Colorado. We are an intermediary in Colorado charged to bring innovation and best practices into the state and work on systems and sustainability. Our scope of work is actually prenatal through age 8 in learning and development, health and well-being, and family support and education.
All right, great. Well, and again, I'm Gabe Hakim, co-founder and partner at Promise, and this is my co-founder and other partner, Matt Glickman. We're really grateful to have you here today. I also have to comment really quickly. I think that is the most efficient version of that introduction I've ever seen. So this whole group, if you want to team up and we can do something magnificent together, you know, you always get a little worried when you open it up like that, but I feel like I learned a lot about each of you in a really short period of time. That's one of the things we coach Ventures on too, so thank you for that and really grateful to have you here in the room. I'll start a little bit with the vision of Promise. Promise was founded 2 years ago, and we have a vision that probably resonates with the values of many folks in this room, which is that we want to help build a world where all children, no matter their background, can fulfill their innate promise. We might be preaching to the choir, but we believe this is the most important social, moral, economic issue of our time, and we think there's a lot of improvement and challenge in front of us, even though it's built on a lot of great work that's happened over decades. So just to share some facts that you may or may not know that contextualizes the challenge to reach that vision is half of low-income 5-year-olds in the United States, 5.8 million children, enter kindergarten not ready. Only 2% of public education funding goes to children under 5 years old. There are 8 times fewer companies that are created in early education compared to K-12. And that happens despite knowing that investments in high-quality early childhood programs have a 7 to 13% return on investment per year. So that's a great disparity. We at Promise Venture Studio, our strategy and our existence is to help try to close some of that gap, really as an enabler or as a catalyst for many of the organizations and ventures that do this work directly on a day-to-day basis. So our mission is to catalyze innovation and growth in the ECD ecosystem by attracting, supporting, and connecting social entrepreneurs, ecosystem stakeholders, and capital with the lens of equity-based outcomes, so to drive outcomes for families facing the greatest adversities. We are thrilled to be here partnering with Futurebound. We've worked with Gary Community Investments and Uncharted and Futurebound over the last year to help sort of get this initiative launched here in Colorado. And it's really part of our vision that initiatives like Futurebound, these hubs of innovation and commitment to early childhood exist all over the country. And we think Colorado is super exciting because this is really the front of the adoption curve. And I think Colorado has the first mover advantage in this regard. As you can see, we share similar visions. We share similar strategies, and our core values are very similar too, which is again based on outcomes and equity in access and outcomes. So we're really excited both to be here today and to be supporting the Futurebound ecosystem going forward. We're also really fortunate to have just a wealth of amazing partners that we work with across the country. Some of them are in the room here today, so it's great to see some familiar faces. You know, while we think that there needs to be a strengthening of the early childhood ecosystem, it would be wrong not to acknowledge some of the great assets that already exist and the great work that a lot of these organizations have done over time or continuing to do, especially when in regards to social innovation in the space. And we're really lucky to work with them on a variety of different programs. We, as an organization, sort of our narrative of our theory of change, why we focused on innovation in the first place is that, as I mentioned, despite all of the great work that's been done to date, there are obvious gaps that we still need to come up with new and better ways to fill. And so, like other areas of social innovation, K-12, digital health, climate change, et cetera, we think that building a virtuous cycle of innovation within the field can help over time to close some of those gaps. And so our thought here is that if we can attract, support, and connect more diverse and more interconnected capital into the field, that will lead to greater innovations, old ideas coming together to create new ideas coming in from outside fields. That will lead to growth in the field and improve the sustainability and the scalability and ultimately the depth of impact of the social ventures within the field. And by doing that over time, that creates a feedback loop that reinforces that cycle. Promise itself has a strategy that is threefold. It's to attract, as I mentioned, more diverse and more interconnected talent and capital into the field. It's to support social entrepreneurs, very broadly defined, in advancing their business models and their impact models to make their organizations more sustainable and more impactful. And then it's about connecting people. Ultimately, if we're trying to build an ecosystem, no matter how many people are a part of it, it doesn't exist without the connection between. And so we do lots of virtual and in-person events to help connect sort of unlikely suspects across silos that may exist within or outside of the field. I think based on what I heard here, a lot of folks are generally familiar with the terms ecosystems and early childhood development. But I'd still like to do a quick overview of what we broadly define as ECD. Of course, it starts when you're talking about who's in, it starts with children. We generally focus 0 to 5, although we also work with programs like Futurebound that goes higher, like 8 or 10. And of course, the adults that shape the environments of young children. We support organizations and ventures across multiple industries, so education, health, childcare, parent support, social services, across multiple domains of development, cognitive, social, emotional, physical, which are all interconnected, especially at the earliest years. And ideally around a shared objective, which is across all of these industries and domains, the idea of driving greater equity and opportunity for all children. And we work across an ecosystem. So we, as you might have guest, do a lot of direct support to social entrepreneurs who play a critical role of innovating in the ecosystem. But we also work in partnership, because none of it can work unless folks are connected, with leading researchers and investors and funders, policymakers, communities and practitioners, customers and systems. All of these surround the children and families that we're trying to drive outcomes for, and so we think it's important for us to play a role in helping to connect and all of us to play a role in working together to come up with better solutions. This is a complex slide that I won't spend a ton of time describing, but it really exists to answer the question, who do we consider a social entrepreneur? And this is also a space where we're very inclusive. Social entrepreneur is somebody who has an idea, an organization, an initiative that we think shares the vision to getting to scaled impact. So that red box up in the upper right-hand corner, that's what we like to think of as the North Star for all of the social entrepreneurs that we work with. But who can be a social entrepreneur is really quite broad. And within our network of over 160 organizations, companies, and ventures that we work with, we have folks who are academic innovators and researchers, community organizations and practitioner-based organizations, some legacy scaled nonprofit or organizations in the field, social entrepreneurs who either are starting in early childhood development or coming to early childhood development from doing social innovation in other fields, and very traditional business ventures who may be venture-backed and are focused on getting financial returns, but also have a vision for social impact in what they're trying to accomplish through that growth and scale. And the way that we support as Promise is to ideally understand that our hypothesis is that a successful social venture needs both a sophisticated business model to sustain itself and a sophisticated impact model to drive the outcomes that we want for children and families. And those two things need to work together in harmony, and that's a really difficult thing for all social entrepreneurs, but even more difficult a lot of times in early childhood development. So our goal is to meet those entrepreneurs where they are, with their organizations where they are, and then sort of tailor or customize the support journey to help them advance either in their business model, their impact model, or both simultaneously. Yeah. This is our awesome team. Matt is here today. Also, Karen, our head of programs, is here. Karen, you want to wave hi real quick? We're a small team that works across, several of us are located in Silicon Valley and Palo Alto. We also, my teammate Chelsea is in Chicago and Michael is in New York. But we do support ventures all across the United States, and we bring a diverse series of experiences, primarily focused in social entrepreneurship and early childhood development. All right, so that's a little bit about Promise. Let's dive into the question that frames this discussion overall, which is, why now? Why is now the right time? Why are we the right people to be advancing an agenda of innovation in early childhood? It may be the most overused but correct cliche broadly in the field that there's the old Chinese proverb that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time to plant a tree is right now. I think that's a great frame for why invest in early childhood broadly. But what excites me is, in addition to that sort of truism, now is a time in early childhood where, especially for those who've been in the field for a while, know that there are significant tailwinds and momentum across multiple key areas that make it possible to really drive innovation and new change in the field. So we like to group those into sort of 4 broad categories, and we'll dive into each of these individually a little bit. But the science is clearer than ever, even compared to science and arguments that are used to justify other social causes. There might be some challenges in getting folks to understand the science or be aware of it, but it is compelling, and really there's, over the last several decades, such a strong base that makes the case for early childhood. Technology that has transformed every industry may have been in some ways slower to make it to early childhood. However, we're seeing it happen now in ways that can enhance the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the quality and access of all kinds of interventions, programs, products, and services. I wouldn't say we're at a tipping point necessarily yet, but there definitely is a great upswing in momentum at federal, state, and local levels in policy and funding, and initiatives like this that sort of are across the that are across different stakeholder groups are a great example of that momentum building. And then, of course, an area where we have great interest, we're just seeing a wave of social entrepreneurship, which we think is a great leading indicator for people who believe that there's great change to be made in a positive direction in any field. And part of what we do is try to support those entrepreneurs and help them be successful. So let's start with the science. And now that I know Corey's in the back of the room, you can fact check me on anything that I get wrong. But there's a number of things on here that I get really excited about, and you may or may not know these at different depths. The Center for the Developing Child at Harvard has great extensive resources on most of these. But to start, as we mentioned, from ages 0 to 3 and 0 to 5, we know that it's the most critical time for the capacity of neuroplasticity within the brain, and a justification for moving more interventions earlier and more supports earlier. There's great research that supports the development of the critical periods of executive function, your ability to plan and to focus and to regulate your emotions, these skills that you basically use throughout the rest of your life in all complex tasks that you do. The critical period for that is between 3 and 5, and then of course it doesn't die off, and there's other opportunities for spikes, but really the opening of that opportunity is from 3 to 5. We know there's a lot of great research on the effects of an unbuffered adversity for children in the early years and the long-lasting cognitive impacts on the brain and the rest of the body that exist. What's really exciting is that we're also starting to understand in a more precise way what can help buffer against that adversity and create resilience, which is different from child to child. But we know that interventions that foster strong relationships between adults and children at early ages is the best buffer and support you can provide, and that's what a lot of great early childhood programs focus on. There's great work being done that sort of on a biological molecular level can test for in terms of figuring out more precisely who and how folks are resilient to different stress levels. There are biomarkers that are being developed to sort of measure that and hopefully be able to identify and then make the case for whom to provide intervention services and when. And then, as we know, a lot of, since parents and adults are so important in early childhood and relationships are what matter for children, a lot of what leads to effective programming is good decision making and behavior change, which is really hard to do. I mean, there's this whole behavioral economics and motivational science is something that's sort of sweeping through lots of different categories. But in early childhood, it's particularly important because adults play such a key role, and adults are busy, and changing our behaviors is hard, particularly because we don't have as great neuroplasticity as we did when we were 0 to 5 years old. In addition to the science, here's a number of technology trends that you are probably very familiar with outside of early childhood, and I think what's exciting to me here is that these trends of mobile and social, being able to connect people through networks, texting, the use of sensors and platforms, and data aggregation and artificial intelligence. These are all being used in ways to increase the reach, the access, and the quality of programs in early childhood. And we'll go through a number of ventures that are an organization that are leveraging these types of technology to improve their programs. I think the thing that gets the most publicity in early childhood when it comes to technology is often, children in front of screens, and is that okay and is that not okay? And the American Academy of Pediatrics has really good recommendations on that, and we encourage folks to look into that. But this is really about technology being used to improve the effectiveness of programming, and we're really inspired by what we're seeing here. As I mentioned, at a national, state, and local level, there's policy and funding movement that is really encouraging. in states like my home state of California, the governor just pledged to invest $2 billion into early childhood initiatives. At a federal level, this administration has grown the child care development block grants to its largest size that it's ever been. Locally, you have great initiatives like Futurebound here that are supported by different policymakers and stakeholders. And then we're also seeing an influx of private and philanthropic capital into the field. And we're working to build that even more. So there are adjacent spaces like health and K-12 education and workforce development that are realizing the critical role that early childhood investments can make. And so we're seeing investment strategies shift towards those. And there's a lot of great opportunities for them to pursue. So we expect more momentum there as well. And then last, but certainly not least, social entrepreneurship. So as I mentioned, there's a wave. This actually, we used to call this the rainbow slide, but it is kind of a wave too. There's a wave of innovation that's happening across multiple categories of early childhood development. And I'll talk through some of these categories and a couple example ventures that exist against each of them. But I'll start by saying that this slide could go 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 ventures deep across most of these categories. So these are just exemplars. And one way to think about these innovations, though it's just to help organize, is that some of them focus more exclusively on issues that are specifically child-focused. Others on the other spectrum are trying to enable or support the adults who create environments for children. And then there's some that are working specifically on the relationship or the dyad between children and adults. But there's a number of categories where we're seeing really exciting innovation. So early literacy and language, early math and computational thinking. Patrick, did you say that your venture is working on that too? So executive function and social emotional learning, both like Pick-a-Pack is an example of sort of a curricular add-on that helps integrate social emotional learning into the early childhood classroom. Reflection Sciences is a venture that's working on an assessment tool that can go as young as 3 years old to get early indicators of developmental progress on executive function. There's also a lot of innovation in developmental screening and assessment. So a lot of demand often generated at a policy level for better screening of children at an early age to identify where there might be sort of a developmental delay or something that is offset early. And then also a lot of innovations to help make sure that we're not just screening children, but connecting them and their families efficiently to the best supportive resources. Cognitive Toy Box is a venture that's doing direct assessment with children. So it's a game-based platform rather than a lot of time-intensive observational-based platforms that directly sort of assesses developmental progress of children. Very critical category of responsive parenting and caregiving. So there are a lot of great innovations happening here. The FIND program, if you haven't heard of them, is a video coaching program for parents and caregivers that records parents in their natural setting interacting with their children as they normally would. And then it's great. It's kind of like a sports-based video replay, strengths-based replay service where they'll edit a video down and then show you exactly what science-based methods you're using to help build your child's brain. And getting back to some of that behavioral economics content from before, that happens to be one of the best ways that adults can change their behavior, is to help them see what they're already doing well rather than just focusing on what might be something that they need to do differently. A lot of innovation and activity in childcare access, supply, and quality. All Our Kin is an organization that's been around for a while that's supporting and scaling in its support of home-based childcare providers, where traditionally there's not been as much information known about those providers, and it's also been harder to access the professionals providing the care there with good supports, and they've done a great job of that in New York and Connecticut and are spreading. And then we're seeing new models pop up in childcare as well. So Wildflower Schools is a Montessori-based micro school. There's you may have heard of My Village or Wonder School, which are sort of franchise-based, home-based, and technology-enabled home-based childcare platforms. In early childhood health, there's a lot of great innovations here as well. Propella is a low-cost, smart infant bassinet that helps to wean infants born addicted to opioids through its pattern of vibrations and movements. Centering Healthcare Institute has been around for a long time and is scaling, continuing to scale nationally. They do group-based OB visits and pediatric care, and it's all Medicaid billable, so it's a really great scalable model that has also shown to have great additional outcomes because that care is happening in the context of a group where parents feel more comfortable and can learn from a professional and from one another in a way that is a lot harder to accomplish in a short one-on-one doctor's visit. The Moms Partnership is focused primarily on driving economic mobility for the low-income mothers that it works with, but it does it through building up mental health supports and addressing a lot of, and reducing depressive symptoms that exist with a lot of the parents that they work with. Empath has a mobility mentoring coaching program where, again, they help to tackle early childhood outcomes through helping to work with parents to escape intergenerational poverty. And then Room to Grow is another great organization that helps. It does parent education, but also provides a lot of material supports, clothes and diapers and toys over the course of the first 3 years. And they've seen great retention and increases in resilience within the families and the children that they're working with over that period of time. So that, as I mentioned, is sort of a sprint through some of these organizations, but more importantly, just to show that when we're talking about innovation, there's opportunities in a wide spectrum of categories within the early childhood field. Some other hotspots and trends that we see, you've heard some of these reflected in the ventures that I just described. So in childcare and early education, there are new supply models. There's the effort to standardize and scale quality, which, for instance, in like home-based childcare is something that is a newer endeavor, but also across the whole spectrum of childcare provision. Tech-infused workforce development and scaled PD. One of the organizations that was in Promises Fellowship this summer is an organization called CellEd. I don't know if you've heard that name before, but they basically do sort of microburst professional development for entry-level skilled jobs. They started in like the hospitality field with English language learners, and even on a feature phone, you can dial in for 3 to 7 minute lessons that are interactive. So they'll both teach you content-specific or industry-specific content to help you develop, and you can text in your responses to questions, or you can get access to a live sort of coach if you're confused about something. And they're moving into early childhood as well. Continuing sort of big data and precision healthcare and predictive analytics. So we're seeing both from sensors and biomarkers and artificial intelligence improvements on helping with infant sleep and crying. There's a venture called Huckleberry, which will get you, for the cost of less than a copay, access to a artificial intelligence informed sleep plan from a certified sleep coach. There's another venture we've worked with called Chatterbaby that helps use infant cries to detect why that baby is crying and what needs they have, but also is doing research to see if some of that data can be used to help provide an early indicator for autism in children as young as 3 months old. So, which is much sooner than a lot of identification efforts are able to do right now. You may have heard of sort of talk pedometers like Lena or Starling that help both count words spoken, in the spirit of addressing the 30 million word gap, but also conversational turns, more complex versions of language development, and they are layering on top of those pieces of technology sort of support systems for home-based, or for parents and for care providers to help them see how they can use that data to improve their practice with children. And of course, tailoring personalized learning for different learning styles and different learning differences. all of that is happening. There's also a movement around the whole child, so health and education, executive function, mental health, social emotional learning, sort of addressing the whole child in addition to sort of the individual areas that different ventures or organizations may traditionally focus on. And then, I think this is an ongoing challenge for the field, but technology and new innovative models are being used to support this, which is also continuing to find models that really engage parents and caregivers as the experts and the first teacher and the best resource that a child has, rather than the recipient of a service or a support, or somebody who's at worst seen as doing something wrong that needs to be corrected. One last sort of page of hotspot overviews that we see. So at the community and neighborhood level, a lot of population health, community scorecard, and as I mentioned, sort of referral innovations to make sure that we're not just screening children for what we perceive as delayed or wrong, but we're using that information to help connect families in the lowest friction way to the right resources. And then also like place-based awareness and education. There's a number of ventures and organizations. Too Small to Fail has done a good job with this in partnership with Coinbase laundromats, and there's another organization out of Boston called Math Talk that's helping to use sort of place-based, in restaurants and in barber shops, just prompts that help parents integrate into their regular daily busy lives ways to enrich their child's development. Lots on parent engagement and education. So we talked a little bit about centering health and bringing parents together to learn with and from one another. Aligning and connecting parents, teachers, and schools via text. So one of the organizations right here in Colorado, Bright by Text, provides sort of geographic specific development timed tips and resources, and then geographic specific connections to folks who might be interested in learning more. And then tailored to specific groups too. So for instance, a lot of dual language learners or English language learners are often, especially from lower income backgrounds, face more challenges in the early childhood space, even though they're technically, and sometimes it's not framed this way, but they're technically developing a superpower that will be very useful for them. And so we're seeing ventures that specifically help support parents of English language learners to take pride and engage in the development of both of those languages at the same time, and to fight against some of the cultural stereotypes that exist. And then last but not least, the sharing in the gig economy. We're seeing this around baby gear, clothing, nannies, childcare, babysitting co-ops. So again, just a plethora of categories and innovation within those categories that I think are really exciting and promising for the future of broadly early childhood development. Promise has collected, to our best knowledge, across the US, the largest searchable, sortable index of each of these ventures and organizations. They are a part of our Promise Venture Network, so we provide programming and support to all of these ventures, but we also feature them in this index, which you can check. I'd really encourage you to check out yourself, and we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible, so if you're interested in ventures that are located in Colorado or ventures that exclusively serve populations that are more than 75% of the population they serve would be categorized as disadvantaged in some way, or if you want to know ones that are specifically focused on topics like social emotional learning or outcomes like parent education, you can sort and filter for all of those. And within the profiles, in addition to sort of this headline, they have a profile that's very rich that describes their business model, their impact model, in a lot of cases links to their pitch decks and theories of change and stuff like that too. I wanted to show this video, and I'm not 100% sure if the audio was hooked up. So given our time, I might just skip past it because I think it'll be a technical difficulty. But one of the things that you can see on that index is a bunch of recorded pitches like this one, and like ones you might see later tonight at the showcase. And then last but not least, in addition to that venture index, which I think is now over 160 profiles, and we're welcoming new ventures in regularly, we have, for folks who are interested, these, we call them funder primers, but they are sort of educational primers that can be accessed and used by anyone for some of these core topics in early childhood that highlight some of the things to know about the science and why it matters, what good looks like, and then experts, resources, organizations you can connect to in any of those categories if they are of specific interest to you. Also last year, as a part of our sort of kickoff event, we did an in-person, what we think was the first national demo day or demo days exclusively dedicated to early childhood development. That was Early Futures, and we'll likely do another one of those sometime in the next year or two. But what we're piloting this year and really excited about are launching this virtual demo day series, which is called Show and Tell. And it's a series of topic-specific demo days that will feature a combination of innovating organizations and ventures, and then also experts from the field and practitioners from the field to contextualize the different types of innovations that are happening. Our first one of those will be January 15th, and it'll focus on the topic of parent support in the earliest years. And we'll be announcing registration for that, I think, within the next week or two. So you can go on our website and just sign up for notifications from us, and we'll let you know about that. We also are planning to do follow-on show and tells around social emotional learning, childcare, supply and quality, and though all of them will have sort of an equity focus to them, we are also thinking about a sort of more horizontal show and tell day focus exclusively on equity considerations in early childhood. And we have ideas for many more and would welcome yours as well as we're building out this series. So that's a race through a lot of the innovation that we're seeing in the field. At this point, I'd really like to open it up. We have about 15 minutes left. And we do a lot of design sessions with entrepreneurs, with funders in the field, and with community stakeholders just to help get the juices flowing. And each of you bring your own perspective to where there is possibility and new possibility within the field. So to kick that off, I'd actually like to start off with a little bit of a quick story. Does anybody recognize this picture or know what this is? Oh, Sheetal. Do you want to say? That would be a great metaphor too, and actually I might steal that one and build it out later. That's not exactly what this one is. This is called an ice stupa. I'm going to read this to you just so I don't mess it up, but it's a really great metaphor that I think applies for innovation in early childhood as well. So it's built in the Himalayas by villagers to store water for the hot, dry season to irrigate crops and provide clean drinking water. It's essentially a cleaved glacier. So up in the mountains, what happens is they run a simple pipe down from a glacier, and at higher elevations, the water flows down, and then they turn the pipe skyward. And what that creates is this tower that you see. It's about 75 feet tall, and it plumes upward, and the tower of ice melts slowly over the dry and hot months, over weeks and months as the temperatures continue to rise. In Kashmir, annual rainfall is only about 4 inches, so this 75-foot tall structure provides 500,000 gallons of potable water in a season. And what's amazing about stupas are a few things. One is its simplicity, it's low cost, it's easy to build, there's really no machinery or electricity required, and it's scalable to almost any village. What's also truly innovative is that the insight, the idea of a stupa has existed for decades, in fact centuries. The only insight that's really new was that the shooting up of the pipe to make a vertical structure, which has less surface area and therefore melts over a longer period of time. So we think this is a great example of showing how simplicity can spark solutions. What we also really like about it, if you read the article describing it in the New Yorker, I love this quote. It says, "We don't look at ice stupas as just a solution to climate change. That's not how we are trying to put this out in the world. What we're really trying to do is foster innovation so that other ideas can come out of it." So both the audacity to say that, in the face of climate change, and there's a lot of, dire things that are happening, like we can help tackle that in these communities, and this is a community-built solution, but also we think that this is a great monument to other ways that we can innovate with simplicity and combining old and new ideas. So if you're as inspired by that as I am, we'll move into a little bit of design thinking. How might we is a great way, for those of you familiar with design thinking, to frame opportunities to improve or innovate in any particular area. And so we've framed up, I'll go by there and back, these are mixed up. So we framed up 3 questions that we don't have to address in order, but I'd like to use them as thought starters for everyone in the room. And they align with our framework of attract, support, and connect. But we'd like to apply them here to the Futurebound ecosystem and to the early childhood ecosystem more broadly. So 1, how can we attract thousands of Coloradans? Did I spell that right? Because I Googled it in multiple places. Great, awesome. And it still wanted to make sure, to contribute to the Futurebound ecosystem. How can we support early childhood development, social entrepreneurs, practitioners, and funders to implement successful initiatives? How can we connect diverse stakeholders to strengthen and grow the Futurebound ecosystem, all towards the end of moving the needle for children and families in Colorado facing the greatest adversities? So if you have a pen and paper or an iPhone or something where you are comfortable jotting down some thoughts, I am going to put you to work right now. I would like to hear from as many folks as possible. So start thinking about those things. And as we do that, I want to circle back to a couple of ideas. Again, we ran through them quickly, but when we talk about supporting innovations in a field, what are different ways that you can do it? These are just thought starters. Would love to see you apply these to the Colorado ecosystem more broadly. But in terms of access, equipping parents and providers with tools that may already exist or be free, help state and local partners pilot new innovations. Around the category of funding, how could we directly fund innovations to help them achieve greater scale? Or how can we leverage statewide purchasing power to lower costs maybe for certain interventions? One that matters a ton in the context of a local ecosystem is collaboration. Is there a way that we can partner funding streams or human or social capital to subsidize and get pilots off the ground or connect state systems to tech innovations with APIs or other automated tools that may not be as well adopted at a government level? And then, of course, learning, what is just ways that we can encourage community learning, draw inspiration from the best practices in adjacent systems and organizations. One of the things I love at a local level that is often harder for folks to do when we're talking about this at a national level is you say, what works really well here in Denver or Colorado is, X, Y, or Z. Like one example that I know of, and is even closer than probably it needs to be for other examples, but there's a great Denver Startup Week here. And how much of that is focused on early childhood, or what of that could we leverage for early childhood? That's just one initiative. You'll know better about the great medical systems you have, or other great sort of initiatives where things have gone really well, and you say, boy, what would that look like to do it here in Colorado with early childhood? So I will put these questions back up, and we'll sort of just do this popcorn style. I hope in the last session we did yesterday, there was sort of great energy from folks in the audience about just where they see opportunity. And I will catalog on the whiteboard as we go. Do I have anybody who's willing to be the first person to share something that they would be excited about for driving innovation here in Colorado?
I'll go.
Awesome.
Excuse me, in my own journey into this, becoming a father and a founder, the thing that blew me away I never knew was the science around the brain development from 0 to 5, right? This window, this magical window that deserves so much more attention. And I feel like if we could bring more awareness around just that fact to society and to people who are outside of early childhood education and just people in the community, that could help to bring even more attention and inspiration to the issue. So what does that look like?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's a community interactive exhibit that's a giant brain and inputs from people with their phones make this thing kind of wire up, something that is interesting and captivating.
I love that. That's a great first. So not to make everybody, you can contribute whatever you have, but I love about this is both, we have kind of the broad concept and a crazy but really possibly cool and effective way to make that work. And if you don't have all those things, great, but I like both the breadth and the specificity. That's thanks for setting the pace for us here, Patrick.
I'm sure actually when it comes to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and they would be all over that.
Great, so there's an example of organization that could be involved with that too. Sorry, you said the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Great. You can just shout them out if you're ready. Don't have to wait for me to finish. Where else would you like to see more innovation, or do you think there's opportunity? Yep.
How might we enhance the job quality for early childhood educators while enhancing their reach?
Job quality and reach for EC. And do you have an idea around that, or what might that look like?
No idea.
Does anybody else have an idea on that?
Yeah,
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it, yeah.
This relates to that point, but also this idea of attracting and connecting. There are some funders in Colorado that are that have a project around innovations in the early childhood workforce and are looking to fund innovations in workforce at the local level that are really seated in community need and connected to communities. And we actually support that work. So it's sort of a ready-made funding opportunity and opportunity to maybe deploy some of these innovations around the workforce.
That's great. For the folks in the room who don't know what that group is called, can you share that?
You can go to our website, Early Milestones Colorado, and look up Transforming the Early Childhood Workforce.
Awesome.
And it's a multi-year effort, funding both local community solutions as well as state system solutions. And then along those lines, I just want to offer up that I don't think attraction maybe is as much of a problem here in Colorado as it is connecting to this effort. And I'd like to offer up a few really important connections. So the state has a system of early childhood councils that cover 99% of Coloradans, children aged birth 8, and their whole reason for being is to bring stronger systems across learning and development and health and well-being into their communities. And those councils are ready and eager to find solutions to support what's going on in their communities. And then another organization, Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, which is a organization of statewide businesses that recognize this as the most important thing they can do, who are also great connectors and investors and interested in supporting this type of work.
What was the name of that one?
Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, EPIC.
Invest.
Oh, right, Epic.
And how might we get, is all of that information on the Early Milestones Colorado website, or how might we do a better job getting that information out to people?
Sure. I don't know if I can give you EPIC is like epic.org. So, and I can connect you with those folks. And the councils are, you can find all the councils at ECCLA, ECCLA.org. And again, I'm happy to make connections to the directors of those two efforts.
And we can, just as a note for, I know see people scribbling notes, and I love that, we can also transcribe these notes and send them out to you after as well. So we'll make sure that we can try to
And
connect.
a lot of this is input into Futurebound, because we did a session yesterday, and I know that GCI team was looking for, like, what are some specific things that we can do, so we'll get these ideas to them as well.
Yes.
Thank you, ColoradoEpic.org.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Piggyback off of what lady said in the back with enhanced job quality, I guess maybe some kind of communication vehicle, something, so that they can actually reach those community leaders or community stakeholders who are responsible for enhancing job quality.
Yeah.
So maybe just some kind of route for communication, direct route for communication for the educators to these stakeholders who are responsible for making job quality better.
Great. So some kind of like connecting
extend that to, I think, all of these various social entrepreneurs, social ventures, you can really help them increase buy-in in the community they're working towards, help connect them to the community so that they're more likely to gain traction.
Great. And I think that is a big objective of Futurebound specifically too. So for those of you interested in that, this would be a great point for that. Yep, Rebecca.
I know we spoke yesterday about trying to stray away from competition, but why not incentivize, social entrepreneurs, practitioners, funders, higher education institutions to really put out their best, initiatives towards early childhood development. So
Yeah, like a challenge.
Like a challenge or something like that.
Yeah, I love that. Yep.
This may be more applicable to past early childhood, but I think one of the hardest parts of being a teacher is kind of the emotional weight of that and the time, and how might we lessen that by removing some stressors. This may exist, but creating some sort of like library or online library or bank of like lesson plans or intervention strategies where teachers or educators can like search and find things and use them.
Definitely applicable to early childhood.
Yeah, that's great.
Maybe we should do some just general questions too.
Yeah, sure.
Why don't we
Take one more.
Just a quick connection point on that. Kathy actually has been developing a teacher mental health program called Embrace. That interesting connection point there.
Great.
Maybe we're piloting it.
So this is a great start. And I know both we at Promise and the folks at Futurebound would love to continue this conversation. So we have a couple minutes left. I want to leave a little bit of time, first and foremost, to say thank you, everybody, for joining. We at Promise will continue to be involved with Futurebound. We also exist to support initiatives nationally that would apply here. So if you have any questions, we encourage you to go to our website, promisestudio.org, and sign up for our newsletter and more information about the different resources and programs that we offer. If you ever have any questions, you can reach out to us directly. Our team inbox is here, team@promisestudio.org, and our emails are just our first name, so Gabe, Matt, and Karen at promisestudio.org. We'd love to hear from all of you. We have about a minute left. If there's any other big questions that exist, I know we didn't really get in this short time frame an opportunity to do a lot of Q&A, but if there's anything anybody's wondering. Yeah.
When you're talking about biomarkers, are you specifically talking about cortisol levels?
Good question. So that is one of the biomarkers, and Corey, who's in the back, could probably talk to you about the whole sort of battery that exists. But there are a number of other ones that can be used too. So there's, for instance, infant eye tracking. So not everything is necessarily internal. There is telomere length is another one. Phil Fisher at the University of Oregon recently told me he thinks the one that is most exciting is, oh shoot, now I'm going to forget it. So I'll leave you with that cliffhanger and get back to you on it. Like that. Come back for more later and we'll tell you. So there are a number of them, but cortisol is probably the one that people hear about the most, and there's innovations related to that as well. Corey, did you want to add to that? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. It was really great having you here. I especially appreciate coming in at 8 a.m., and we look forward to being in touch. Thank you.